stress in itself is not a mental health issue. It's often the starting point for many. Okay, well, I was a hyperactive child. I drove my parents up the wall with my endless amounts of energy. I wouldn't sleep. I needed constant attention, and no matter what my parents seemed to do, I wouldn't rest. The family doctor labelled me as a problem child. And he said to my mum and dad, if you can't cope with Leon, I can always take him off you and sedate him. And for whatever reason, my mum and dad balked at this. They decided that they would find another way. So my parents decided to fight fire with fire, and they decided to attempt to tire me out. And I was taking part in any physical activity that was going, and every sport that I was able to do at the age that I was at. And magical things started to happen. I became easier to manage. And I'm glad my parents went down the physical activity route, because my dreams of going to the Olympic Games started when I was 6 years old. Ultimately, I followed my Olympic dreams in the sport of diving, competing at 3 Olympic Games and even winning an Olympic medal in 2004. And none of that would have been possible if my mum and dad hadn't chosen physical movement as my medicine. In a recent index of over 300 diseases, mental health problems were the largest cause of the overall disease burden worldwide. And there's a huge percentage of the population who don't necessarily have a diagnosable mental health problem, but who are suffering with their mental health. Stress in itself is not a mental health issue. It's often the starting point for many. Thinking isn't necessarily the solution to our problems. Thinking is often the cause, especially when we get stuck in a pattern of overthinking. Overthinking leads to psychological stress. So what can we do? We can move more. We can physically move. Because, physically moving changes absolutely everything. Moving physically in the short term immediately changes our state. It boosts our mood, and it releases the buildup of stress in our human nervous system. And over the long term, consistent physical movement changes the structure of our brain. It boosts self-esteem and decreases the biological reaction to psychological stress. A different type of movement intervention was used to combat anxiety disorders. It was shown that aerobic exercise actually was a fantastic intervention into those who are suffering. Fritz and O'Connor in 2016 showed that 20-minute bouts of medium intensity exercise successfully reduced symptoms of those with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. So what would happen if we reclaimed our mental health by moving more? Well, there's 2 actions that you can all take. The first one is when you find yourself in a context where you're stressed, whatever that is. Maybe you're hunched over the laptop. Maybe it's a completely different context. When you're stressed, you're poisoning your body. The thing that you do is get up and go for a walk, if that is available to you. If you're physically not capable of that, even just changing your posture and the rhythm of your breath is enough to change the chemicals in the brain and move you from stress more towards wellness. And the second long-term solution is a challenge. I challenge you to find your movement, your physical movement, sport, activity. It doesn't matter what it is. The movement that fills you with joy. So I challenge you to be creative, walk, run, swim, dive, play tennis, kick a football, whatever you need to do, but the magic ingredient here is enjoyment. So in this world of stress, overwhelm, and overthinking, we need to get out of our heads and back into our bodies. We need to physically move more, because if we don't, the children of this world will continue to model our behaviors of stress and inactivity, and this mental health unwellness will continue to rise.